Hi, everybody in Research Methods, Psych 290. Today we start section 5 of the reading packet, which is actually two different topics, operational definitions and the types of bias in research. So let's get started. First of all, the first topic, operational definitions. I would encourage you, maybe put this recording on pause. We're going to do that a few times in this recording, and just read this first page. It's actually a classic psychological study that maybe you've heard of from Psych 101 or another class, or perhaps not. If we were meeting in class together, I would give you some time to read all 4 of these paragraphs. So if you want to push pause on this recording, this would be a good time to do it now. Okay, I'm going to start back up again. Whether you've read it or not, I'll tell you what you need to know. Stanley Schachter did a landmark study in 1959 using only college students who were females at his university. I know that sounds kind of sexist, but that was one of his original studies. And what he was studying on this particular day, or it was actually 2 days, affiliation. If I went around a classroom and asked everybody what the word affiliation means, some people wouldn't know at all, and I bet everybody else would have a slightly different definition. So, Stanley Schachter not only gets credit for doing a very interesting, thought-provoking study, but also for clearly defining things. He defined affiliation very clearly, the need to be with other people, but he was so precise that he even talked about how many feet away they would sit or stand from each other, what exactly they would do as far as talk to each other or not talk to each other, and for how long. He defined it very clearly. He also had people in a high anxiety or low anxiety group for his study. This was done on 2 different days. What he did basically was had a colleague that worked with him who had a German accent, and they called him Dr. Zilstein, even though that was not his real name. And they had him come into this room with a group of women who agreed to be there, young college students, and there was a machine up in front of the room. And he said, well, you all agreed to be here and you all agreed to participate, in his German accent. Remember, this was the 1950s. People were phobic of Germans back then. They were definitely the out group at the time. This was post-World War II. So this guy saying he's Dr. Zilstein shows them this machine and says, you agreed to be here, you agreed to participate. And he told the first group, they were the high anxiety group, that they would be getting electric shocks, and it will hurt, it will be painful, but I expect you to participate. And then he said, I'll be back in a few minutes and we'll get started. Well, guess what? Those women chose to stay right where they were, and they talked to each other and they commiserated about, why do we have to do this? I didn't agree to this. They chose, their preference was to wait with others, and they had a high need for affiliation as he defined it. The very next day, he had the same German-looking dude, Dr. Zilstein, come and talk to them, but it was a different group of women, and they were told something totally different about that machine, that it would not hurt, and that what they were going to do would not be painful or uncomfortable. So the low anxiety group chose not to affiliate. What did that mean? Well, basically the discussion section of his report said, misery loves company. You find out that you're in a miserable spot and so is the person next to you, you want to affiliate with that person. So again, Stanley Schachter deserves credit for 2 things. Not only was this a crazy study with some interesting results, that misery loves company, people like to affiliate with each other when they're not in a good mood, but also how clearly he defined everything in his study, from the low anxiety group to the high anxiety group to what it means to affiliate with another person. Now, if we were in class together, what we would be talking about is the concept of an operational definition. You need to be as clear as possible so that there is no way for anybody reading or participating in your study to misunderstand. So if you took Psych 101 with me and we talked about newlyweds, and I show you a study that newlyweds is 2 years or less of marriage, doesn't matter whether you agree, that's a definition that cannot be misunderstood by any reasonable person. If I said a good GPA is over a 3.0, well, you don't have to agree with that as long as it's specific enough that it can't be misunderstood. If I said that a hot day in Arizona is over 100 degrees, you might not agree, but it's so specific that you cannot misunderstand it. So therefore, I would not say a hot day is pretty warm. That could easily be misunderstood. It's too vague. I would not say a newlywed is somebody who just got married. That's too vague. You have to make it specific so that it cannot be misunderstood or misinterpreted. Whether people agree with your definition is their own problem. It just has to be so specific that there's no misunderstanding. So, next thing, I would encourage you to pause the recording again and read this next page that says, pretend for a moment that you're a third grade teacher. So if you want to play along, pause it right now. Okay, we're back to the recording. Here is what I want to talk to you about with regard to this page. Notice we have not had any explanation yet, but you're a third grade teacher. As the school year begins, kids are in 3 reading groups. The antelopes, they are advanced academically. The giraffes, well, they're right at grade level, right where they should be for a third grader. And then you have the buffaloes. They're below grade level. When you were in elementary school, was this true? Did they put kids in names of groups with, I don't know, animal or insect names or something, or colors? Probably, but I bet every kid knew which one was advanced and which kid wasn't and who was in what group. That's just the way it tends to work. That's been true forever. Well, you just put all the kids in the groups, but then here comes 3 new kids into your class. This happens when you're a teacher. So, you have Billy, Ann, and Greg. When you read about them from the email that you received from your principal, what you learn is Billy had to repeat kindergarten. He wasn't very mature. I don't know how you can be immature as a kindergartner, but I guess that's what they decided, huh? He and his younger brothers were raised by their grandmother, poverty-stricken part of the city, rarely sees his mother. She's addicted to drugs. Doesn't even sound like he has any contact with his father. Yeah, it says that, huh? Never met him. Maybe no contact either. Mom's been married twice in the past 6 years. Oh my goodness, this kid's life's a mess, isn't it? Good thing he has grandma. What about Anne? Second generation Asian American child. Parents are both tenured university professors. They believe in the importance of education. She went to an expensive preschool, gave her one-on-one academic and study time. Wow. They're frequent visitors to the school. They demand to know how she's progressing. Oh my goodness. Let's move on. Greg, he's the third kid that comes into your class. He sounds about as average as a kid could be. Both his parents work full-time jobs, kind of average jobs too. His mom is a secretary, dad's a postal carrier. He has a sister. Let's see. Mom's at work all day, then she comes home. This sounds just like a pretty average family, huh? Average middle-class family. So, you've got to put one kid in each of those 3 reading groups. Did you decide that Billy is a buffalo? Because obviously he's not very capable. He's got to be struggling with his learning. Did you decide that Anne has to be an antelope because she just sounds super smart? And what about Greg? He just should be in the average group, right? The giraffes for kids who are average. Guess what? Wrong. Go through and read those paragraphs again, A, B, and C. They are very biased, and that is the topic of this part of the reading packet of Section 5. Biases. We all have them. Maybe we don't realize it, but we do. There is nothing in the paragraph about Billy to say that he's low functioning. It's just an assumption we make based on his demographics. It's a bias. Same thing with Anne. Whoever wrote this threw the Asian American thing in there. Maybe we think of Asian people as being really studious. There's no evidence of that in this paragraph. Her parents are university professors. Still no evidence that she's above average and that they're, nosy at the school and they want to know everything that's going on. It still doesn't mean that she's above average. Same thing with Greg. He sure sounds pretty average, but there is nothing in the paragraph to make it proven. Now, 6 kinds of research, 6 types of research. You definitely want to know this for the next test. First of all, the Hawthorne effect. This occurs when people know they're being watched. Very similar to the observer effect with naturalistic observation, but this is more of a research study. If people know they're being watched and observed, they're going to act differently. This came from a study, the Hawthorne study actually, where people in white lab coats with clipboards in their hands were watching employees work. Of course they're going to act differently when they know they're being watched. Believe it or not, that happened at the Maricopa colleges. They hired an outside agency to go to classrooms and follow people around, and of course you're going to change your behavior when you know that's going on in front of you. The novelty effect. This is similar but different. All of these are similar, but they're slightly different, and that's what you need to know. The novelty effect. Something is new. That's why you're acting that way, because it's new and it's unexpected. Oh, we've never had a substitute teacher before. Oh, we've never had snacks before we went to lunch. If that's what your school day was like as a kid, well, maybe you're acting differently because it's new, not for any other reason. The halo effect. Now, if we were in class, I would tell you, before anybody raises their hand, I know that it's a video game, and I know it's a song by Beyonce also. This is different. Halo here meaning angel. You try to act like an angel. You try to act perfectly. So, if the study is being done and you're asking people about their sex lives or their drug use or their criminal behavior, don't be surprised if you get a halo effect. People acting as if they're angels, basically. That's the way you should think of it. So that's a type of bias. The Pygmalion effect. This happens when the people in your study act just like you expected them to. So in other words, you as the researcher are biased. This is similar to observer bias that is in the part about naturalistic observation, that you see people for what you want to see them as, your own personal bias. But this is slightly different, the Pygmalion effect, because it is part of an experiment instead. There was a Broadway play and a novella called Pygmalion, and then that character has been incorporated into future Broadway plays and musicals and books and everything. So that's where we get the term Pygmalion from. Oh, you're acting just like I thought you would. Well, that's because I am biased. Experimenter effect. What if I unduly influence people? Similar to Hawthorne, although in Hawthorne, they know they're being watched, so they act differently. Well, the experimenter effect is by accident. What if I give too much attention to one group or the other? What if I stand too close to one group or the other? I might unduly influence them without even realizing it. There was a famous study of a man with a horse called Clever Hans, and the horse could count. The man would hold up a number and the horse would bang one of his front hooves exactly that number of times. But then somebody realized something. What if the horse's owner did not know what the number was? They had him hold up a number but not look at it. Guess what? The horse couldn't count. Oh my goodness! Well, what was happening? The horse was not reacting to the number he was holding up. He was reacting to the guy's nodding of his head up and down. And the horse was banging his hoof to that, not to reading numbers. So I guess horses can't count after all. Well, you know what? The same could be true for people. You give them too much attention or not enough attention, or you stand or sit too close to them, or you talk to them in a certain way. Without realizing it, you unduly influenced their behavior. And the last one, pretest sensitization effect. If you've done it already, maybe that's why your people are reacting that way. Kind of like Dr. Zilstein, and if it really was an electric shock, by the way, it wasn't. But let's just pretend. The next time around, you might react to that. What if it's something good, like, oh, we got dessert, we got candy, we got cupcakes? Well, people might react to that too, because it was something positive. But it really doesn't matter. What we're really talking about is if you've done something before, whether it was positive, negative, or neutral, maybe it was the fact that you've done it already, the pretest, and it made people act differently. So at Chandler Gilbert, some of our departments, sort of like the math department has done this, given people the final exam on the first day of class. And then the last day of class too. Why on earth would they do that? Well, they want to know if you've improved over the course of a semester. Well, here's my question. Maybe your people have improved that are in your study, your subjects, or maybe they've just seen the test already. So that is another aspect to this pretest sensitization effect. Maybe people are reacting and scoring higher in some cases just because they've done it already or seen the pretest already. That's what we're talking about. So let's briefly go over all of this again. Section 5. Operational definition. You don't really need to memorize Schachter's study all that much. Just know that he gave very clear operational definitions to discover that, yes, it's true. Misery loves company. And you don't want any room for misunderstanding. If I say, oh, my book for chemistry was expensive, well, what do I mean by that? It cost a lot? That's not a good definition. How about it was more than $200? That's a definition. Whether you agree or not doesn't matter, but it's very clear. Second thing is, we went over this page, and just to show you how easy it is to be biased. It would be easy to just assume that Anne is above average and Billy is below and Greg is average, but if you read those paragraphs carefully, nothing in there says anything like that. And then the 6 forms of bias in research, different than a naturalistic observation, because you're just observing people in that case. This is actually doing a research study. Hawthorne effect. If people are walking around observing you and looking over your shoulder, of course you're going to act differently. The novelty effect. It's new. I've never done this before. That's why I'm acting this way. That's what your people would say in a novelty effect problem study. Halo effect. I'm going to act like an angel. I'm going to not admit to any problem that I've had or that I would do anything that anybody would think is less than perfect. Pygmalion effect. You are acting just the way I thought you were going to act. It's my own bias in my head. So that's the one that's similar to the page right before this, Pygmalion effect. You are just like I thought you would be. Experimenter effect. Maybe without realizing it, I unduly influence people. A nod of my head, the tone of my voice, where I'm standing, if I put my hands on them, when I say, hey, good luck with this, it could be any of those things. And then the pretest sensitization effect, in a good, bad, or even a neutral way, people act differently because they've done it before. Kind of like taking the same test for math on the first day and the last day. That's what we're talking about here. You've done the test before, you know what's on it, you know what it's about, and that's why you are acting this way. So that is it for section 5, and we will move on to section 6 with the next recording. Take care.